a lot of people, but in the 20s and 30s, spend a lot of time at the family dinner table having conversations with their family members who are stuck in some old school routines. Sometimes we can see that it's gone stale. Now, we're not disrespecting them. They've got us to where we are, and they've got some great things that we should learn from. But as teenagers, 20s, 30s, we can see sometimes, what the hell have you, how have you not accepted your African identity? How have you not started to walk this path? My question to you is, how did you get it?
Well, okay. Are you recording? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, it was easy. The first thing, like I've said to you guys, is my mum is African. She's an Igbo woman. And as I've told you, maybe not you, Ant, or Jerome, obviously I've just met you, a lot of Igbo culture is in Jamaica, Barbados certainly, Haiti, Cuba. So this Igbo mentality is a rebellious mentality. And there was a movement when the British were trying to colonise Africa called the Ekumuku movement, if my memory serves me. They were Igbo warriors who fought from before the scramble, yeah? So when they just saw little inklings of the white man, they were ready to knock him out, basically. Let's get it right. So before they'd even done the scramble in 1884 it was. 1883, he started warring with the white man. This went on until 1914. That's when they could actually unify Nigeria, basically. After they knocked out the Igbos, because the Yorubas, little skirmishes. The Hausas or the Fulani Hausas, few skirmishes. The Igbos were just guerrilla warfare, like the Maroons they were doing, man. Guerrilla warfare continually. So I've got that kind of spirit from my mum. My mum always had the saying, Igbo don't like white. My mum could speak English better than me, but when she was, Igbo don't like white. Now, it wasn't so much that, but they were just resistant. If you study Igbo people, like the Jamaicans, they love the culture. We love our culture, yeah? And if you look at a lot of the Afrobeat music, the Igbos who are doing it, they're always talking about the culture, basically. And that's when you look at the comments going, oh yeah, all you Igbos do stuff about your culture. So we love who we are as Igbo people, basically. So yeah, that's the first foundation for me. My mum, strong African woman, very, very in love with who she was and the culture, etc. And then for me also, it was people like growing up, because I grew up in the 70s, I'm a bit older than you guys. For me, growing up, it was people like Muhammad Ali, it was people like Bob Marley. So for me, two things that stood out for me as a youth, which resonated with what my mum said. That's why I could relate to certainly Rasta and certainly what Muhammad Ali was saying. The first thing was what Bob Marley said. I saw him getting interviewed in the 70s, and he said, oh yeah, riches, money. It's like what you were saying before, Ant, about it's not what you are, it's who you are, which counts. He goes, riches, money. They were talking about riches, money to him, and he said, if my life just for me no want it. And I said, rah, because like my mum always used to say, you must love others, love others. So I said, yeah, that feel that, yeah. And then when Muhammad Ali beat George Foreman in 1974, you guys won't remember that. You've probably seen the fight. When he beat him in 1974, the first interview we had, he goes, now black people, listen up. Black kids, stay in school. Black boys, do your best. Black girls, don't wear loose clothes. Don't all this thing. And I'm like this, like 8'7", like this. Wow, wow. I've never heard a black man talk so. Wow. So in studying those two, Bob, Rasta, Muhammad, Nation, Garvey was the common root to both of them, basically. That's what I discovered in later life. So these are the things that informed me as a young man about my blackness, basically. So growing up in Liverpool, very white city, very Eurocentric, small black community, Toxteth, as you know, I don't know if you guys have been there, it's changed now, but it was a small but a strong black community. It's got the oldest black community in England. It came from even like veterans from the Civil War, was it, coming over, and they started the community. Then West Africans come over, Somalians, whatnot, and that's how the community grew. But it was always a small community. The people there were very racist. It was a very racist environment, Liverpool. So black people stuck together. And it's got what people call a lot of mixed race. But we never ever said that in Liverpool because you see different complexions here. We don't care about that. If you're black and you recognise that you're with us, basically. And that's it. And that's how it was in Liverpool. There was none of this. In London, I noticed that thing that you see mixed race people are treated differently. We didn't do none of that in Liverpool, man. If you're black, even if you're light skinned, if you know yourself and you recognise that African in you, we're with you, basically. And that was it. So growing up in this place, very racist, we kept fit. We had to just make sure that we were on our toes, because there was a lot of white racists about, bro. So we were fit, and we were conscious about being black, very conscious of the oldest black community, very conscious about the history of slavery from Liverpool. All people were. So these things were what informed me as a black man. And then it was just really seeing Rasta people, very strong they were, man. They didn't take no nonsense. Can I use swear words here?
Of course.
I was going to say the S word. I don't want to diss your I don't want to diss your format, but they didn't take any shit, the Rastas, basically. So for me, I loved the whole energy of Rasta, basically. And then I met a brethren who come from Coventry, and everyone was going, oh, he's so wise, he's so wise, he's so wise. So I said, okay, let me meet this brother and see how wise he is. And he said certain things to me which impressed me. I said, okay, let's give this thing a shot. And I had another younger brethren, and you met him. When you give me that lift and you met him, he's a bit younger than me, like a year or so younger. But his brother was Rasta, and he was Rasta, and so he used to come with my brother. And then me and him used to reason. I said, yo, you're quite mature, man. So then he said, okay, come to the Rasta house, bro. So that's how I kind of got into Rasta and the black consciousness aspect of things in the 80s, that was. Now, for me, Rasta is about black consciousness. It's about knowing yourself as an African, what we mentioned. It's about how are we going to liberate African people, basically. And in the 80s, that was the only thing, really. The nation wasn't really in England so much, although the interest in Malcolm X was bubbling, certainly, in the 80s with Public Enemy. But Rasta was the vanguard. So, for me, it's really taken me on a journey. Because when I first was into Rasta, there's various manifestations of Rastafari. So you've got Nyabingi, Bobo, and 12 tribes. Nyabingi and Bobo say Haile Selassie is God Almighty, yeah? 12 tribes say he's like a Jesus character, a Messiah. So I joined that. It was easy for me being a Christian, as we mentioned, being a Christian. Because instead of Jesus, I was saying Selassie, you understand? So it was an easy transition in that sense, but it was more of an African affirmation as opposed to an Israeli or Jewish thing. I wasn't feeling that at all. But even in that, going through that, life's a process. So what you know when you're 20, you know different things when you're 30. So as I'm going through this, and this Jesus thing and this God thing, I'm thinking, there's something not quite right about this thing. There's something missing. So as I'm researching, what we do is we start reading books. We start reading these classic books like G.M. James, The Destruction of Black Civilization. A lot of Gerald Massey stuff. We're just reading these books and we're just getting knowledge, man. And we're listening to John Henry Clark and Ashraf Kwesi and even Farrakhan when he was black conscious. I say when he was black conscious. and I'm amped listening to these guys. I'm saying, yeah, you have to love yourself, and it's about black women, and it's about knowing yourself, and so for me, studying Rasta and obviously the other gentlemen I've mentioned, the other people, it was about knowledge of self, basically. It's about knowing who you are. So that became my ideal in Rasta. It's about who we are as African people. So for me, the emphasis is that we are divine African people. That's the first thing you got to realise. You're the king or you're the queen, that's it. That's why we say in Rasta, yes king, yes queen, yes empress. You understand? So for me, that's the mindset I determined I'm going to put in our people. Think highly of yourself. You must think highly of who you are. You must think the very best of yourself. You must do your best to help African people. So when we think about the concept of Garveyism and Rasta, because both, one's a natural transition to the other, the first thing is black pride. Or you could say knowledge of self. It encompasses a number of things. So for me, black pride is about not just being proud to be black. You must be proud to call yourself an African. And also, if you study your history, you wouldn't want to call yourself anything else but an African. So that to me is not an argument. So if you have any psychological turbulence about calling yourself an African, this is what the white system does to you. It doesn't want you to call yourself African. It wants you to call yourself Black British or Caribbean or Nigerian, or not African. We're Africans. That's the one identity we should have holistically. So Black Pride encompasses, as I said, knowledge of self. And what it does, being proud to be black, being proud to be African, studying your history essentially, it gives you your African identity and it gives you your African personality. And then, with this knowledge of who you are, you want to go out into the world and make your mark. You have to, because you've got so much energy in you. With this, the white society tries to present us as thugs. Our women are strong and aggressive. That's what they mean. But the reality is that when we study our history, you destroy all that because you know you're a king, you know you're a queen, and how you're going to manifest that kingliness is by aiding African people, is by building a business, an organisation or institution that's going to aid our people. So yeah, the first thing you must have is Black Pride, and this is what this journey has taught me, if you like. Because it's psychological, isn't it? Black Pride starts in your mind. Being proud to be black and African starts up here. So with this knowledge of being proud to be black, the next step with Garveyism, the two prongs that go together, race pride and self-reliance. You have to create things that are going to benefit our people because we know our history. We're just a continuum of this wonderful history we've got. So we have to, whatever our ancestors have done, there's another important thing. The greatness we see in our ancestors, we must see in ourselves, basically. That's how I'm interpreting it. So I'm saying that you must see, when you see Ramesses, the great builder, you must see yourself. When you see Garvey, you must see yourself. When you see Harriet Tubman or Nanny, you must see yourself, basically. So that's. So when we're talking about self-reliance and all these great achievements, what they've done, you can do too. So we must work towards a self-reliance, and that's, as I said before, creating institutions, organisations, or businesses that are going to help our people. So for me, this is very much part of who I am. It's informed me since I was 17. I'm a big man now, as you can see. And I haven't really moved from that. But also another thing which was Garveyism and which is in Rasta, and to an element now with the nation now, is the concept of nationhood. We're one black people. That's also very important. So this is the concept of Pan-Africanism. We're one black people. I remember seeing a program about the Jews on ITV, and they was the only thing that I remember the woman saying is, Jewish people, we're one people. Wherever we are, we're one people. It's the same for African people. It's the same for us. We are one people, and we must recognise that. When I was growing up, there was a dichotomy sometimes between Africans and Caribbeans, not in Liverpool, because mainly Africans in Liverpool. But when you come to places like London and Birmingham, certainly, there was a dichotomy. Now, with the Afrobeat, no one don't care. Everyone wants to be African or wants to be Nigerian, which is great. But yeah, that dichotomy, that idea that we're different has to be destroyed. Because I've heard so many times people from the Caribbean who have this disparity for African people say, oh, you sold us into slavery, you sold us into slavery. I say, okay, so do Caribbean people sell Caribbean people into slavery? If that's the case, you can't be upset with them when you're doing it yourself. We have to cut that nonsense. We have to recognise that we were traumatised historically. And this is part of the trauma playing out. Now we have to just reverse the cycle, basically. So for me, these are the three things that have always informed me. The African pride, Black pride, self-reliance, and nationhood. So this is where I'm standing right now, man, on those three pinnacles, essentially.
How have you found navigating through the system, the UK system, knowing this information?
That's a good question, man. I mean, obviously, Britain was the biggest stockholder, if you like, in slavery,
and
basically.
Liverpool was a port, right?
Bro, before Liverpool was involved in slavery, it was a small, sleepy fishing town. So like 150 years later, it became the third biggest city in England. So after Birmingham, it was the biggest city, not Manchester. Liverpool was bigger in size. So yeah, and we were very aware of that history in Liverpool. The elders never hid it from us. Navigating the system, bro, it's the same issues I have is the same issues you have, basically. Nothing's changed, really, in that sense. If you're black, you've got limited roles. I used to work in Waitrose, and we called it White Rose. We used to work in Waitrose. We called it White Rose, and we called it Hate Rose, because the managers really didn't want to see any black people who thought black, I should say, progress. The only black people who were at the top were, if you're humble, like there was one, the Igbo brother, he was very humble. I can't remember his name, but he was nice, and that's why he was up there. But there was another one, I'm not going to call his name. He was a living white man, he was a living Christian, and that's why they kept him up there. And when he was dealing with me, he dealt with me horribly. So when we talk about neocolonialism, it's really a black face doing what white people are doing instead of the white man doing it. And that's what he was to me. He was a neocolonialist. He was very oppressive towards me because I told him about his Christian roots. I told him where it came from. He didn't like it, and then he oppressed me, basically. And I know that, I'm not going to call it, you know that because you were there when I was telling him, basically.